Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday morning. Leadership in changing times, leadership at all levels. Frontline professionals from all across North America, literally all across North America, sitting in rooms 20 at a time, 30 at a time, guys with arms crossed, looking up at the ceiling. No, just kidding. No, that's not you. That's not you. Well, welcome. Glad you could make it. Glad that you could be a part. It's funny. We're going to talk a little bit about an exercise that you did, hopefully, the leadership style inventory. But the bulk of our time today is we're going to start talking about the competencies necessary to be effective today. My supposition is that leadership needs to happen at all levels, and that in these changing times, we need frontline professionals like you more than ever before to be as good as they can be. And I know that the times are challenging and difficult in many, many departments. And many of you have sent me emails talking about how you're working through that adversity, talking about your commitment to purpose, talking about how you're frustrated. I mean, let's be honest, how you're frustrated that you can't always get done everything you want to get done because your level of professionalism is such that you want to do excellence for your community. We got to give a quick shout out to the good guys in Nashua and gals in Nashua, all of the departments in Kansas and in the Midwest, and others who are doing an excellent job in some really challenging storms this winter season. So to the professionals in Kansas that are a part of the program, big shout out. To all of you in New England and in the Atlantic provinces of Canada, big shout out, man. Great work, great work. And I'm sending some individual videos to specific departments to thank you for your hard work and energy. Many directors have sent me a list of things that frontline people have done and whole departments have done. So we're going to be crafting some individual videos as thank yous, just a shout out to thank you for your professionalism and hard work. Okay, so now we begin the learning. From here on, every 3 weeks, we sit down and we chat about a specific competency. Remember, a competency is a complex set of skills, attributes, attitudes, and the like that make somebody good at a chosen vocation, make them good at something. It takes certain competencies to be a great hockey player. It takes certain competencies to be a jewel cutter, right? If I'm a jewel cutter, it takes certain competencies. It takes certain competencies to lead. It takes certain competencies to get things done. Now remember, from the beginning of the program, I mentioned to you, I said to you, there's that thing sticking out of the side of my head, that's awesome. A little ADD there, moment. Now, from the beginning of the program, I mentioned to you my assumptions of you. Remember that? My assumptions of you? I said that one, you were a professional, that you took your professional development and your craft seriously. Two, that you wanted to do something great. I assumed that you wanted to do something great for your family, something great for the community, something great for yourself, that you weren't just going through the motions of work, that you took your job seriously and you understood its impact. You wanted to do something great. And then finally, my third assumption was that you were going to take something that we talked about and actually do it. So with those assumptions as a backdrop, see how we changed that camera thing? That was good. With those assumptions as a backdrop, we talk about these competencies in these changing times. We know that we need all hands on deck. We know that we need everybody doing the best that they can. Yeah, but I'm a little frustrated, Ian. We haven't gotten a raise in 4 years. Yeah, but I'm a little frustrated, Ian. Management doesn't seem to be listening. Or I'm a little frustrated, Ian. Things don't be seeming to go the way that I want, the way that we want. Yeah, that's what those things that I just said are a reality in many, many departments that are a part of this program. The challenge is that there's still girls and boys driving over that bridge to go to school every day. The challenge is the elderly lady still turns on the water to boil some eggs for her egg salad sandwich. The challenge is that in severe storm situations, the roads need to be plowed, the sidewalks need to be open so that people can still do life. And it's regrettable that people don't understand always the value of what we all do every day. That's true. But that doesn't mean we can't do it to the best of our ability, because thousands of citizens are counting on us to do it. And surely, if we don't do it as well as we can, people definitely won't see the value, right, Jeff? People definitely won't see the value if we're not doing it to the best of our ability. So the whole premise here is, how can we equip ourselves to be as successful as possible in these changing times? Well, from now on, we're going to talk about these competencies. I gave you an exercise, and I don't know if you've had time to do it. Hopefully you have. If you haven't, that's fine. Just do it at some point. And that exercise was that leadership style inventory. Now, I gave that exercise to your bosses, to the directors and the executive leaders. I gave that exercise to your mid-level leaders, and I gave that exercise to you, frontline professionals. And the whole point of the exercise was to get some deeper insight into how you operate, how you do things, your style, your approach, and what fits you best. And the purpose of giving it to everybody up and down the chain of command was to get a better understanding of how not only they or you operated, but how others operated, to gain alignment. The only way that we can be successful in changing times, in my opinion, is that we've got to have a cohesive team. All arrows pointing in the same direction. If there's friction, if there's misunderstanding, if there's distrust, if there's a lack of leadership, if there's a lack of communication, all of those things will just exasperate the challenges that come from changing times. And unfortunately, and you know this from relationships in like a marriage, when times get tough, we got two choices. Go at each other, or we can go back to back. Back to back. I got a buddy, he's a cop. And him and his wife told me one time, and my wife, they said, and this is the cop talking now, his name's Greg Ray. He played for the Dallas Cowboys for a short period of time. He was a small college All-American at the University of Nevada, Reno, way back in the day, and then he got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. And I think he made it through training camp and made it through some of the preseason. Good guy. He said that in a firefight, total cop, right? Everything is an analogy of death. But anyways, and you're up against it, you got to go back to back, because then you won't shoot each other. Now, I don't know much about community policing. I don't know much about the military. My father was in the military for 33 years, and he was a great guy, but that's the extent. So I don't know if Greg was right or not, but he said when times get tough and things get rough, they've been trained to go back to back. And it's funny. I thought about that from a relational standpoint, and I think, you know, when times get tough and things get rough, do my wife and I go head to head, or do we go back to back, so that we're in a position to help each other, right? Back to back. Well, bring that thought to the department. When times get tough and things get rough, do we try to find ways to work together? Do we try to find ways to problem solve? Do we try to find ways to get our job done? Do we try to find consensus? Do we try to find common ground? Or do we just go at each other? I don't know, man. And I know animosity and anger and bitterness and all that stuff, but these are times where I think we got to be back to back, Jeff. Or we got to be back to back. Greg was a wise guy. Dumb as a rock, but a wise guy. I hope he's not watching. Wise, back to back. What's your point? I don't get it. You're rambling. I don't think I am. I'm trying to make the point that in difficult and changing times, that's when we got to be a more cohesive team. In difficult and changing times, that's where we need everybody to be their best. Because the other choice just exasperates the difficult and challenging time. So that leadership style inventory, were you a nurturer? Were you an organizer? Were you an energizer? Were you a researcher? Ah, that's crap, man. Namby-pamby nonsense. Well, I can understand how on the surface some of those exercises do seem a little ridiculous, except when you pull it back a little bit and pull back the one layer of the onion, you realize that if I understand how you operate, a little bit better than I did the day before, and you understand how I operate a little bit better than you did the day before, hopefully we can come to some common alignment of our energy, of our effort. Look, we can work 8 hours against each other, or we can work 8 hours with each other, in alignment with each other. So the purpose of that exercise was to give you some deeper insight into how you operate and some deeper insight into how others operate around you. We didn't take the exercise. Then go to your supervisor and say, hey, we want to take this exercise, because they were supposed to take the exercise. And then finding out what they are and how they operate, and then finding out how you are and you operate. It seems to me that in today's day and age, if we're a little bit enlightened, we'll try to seek out how other people operate and then bend our style a little bit to meet theirs to gain that alignment. Well, part of gaining that alignment is changing. Changing. You see, I think the number one tool that a professional can have in their toolkit today is the ability and capacity to deal with change. In our first time together, I tried to make the case that things are changing rapidly. And like Drucker said, we're in a time of transformation. Remember, he said every couple hundred years in Western history, society rearranges itself, and the society the grandparents knew is completely different than the society the grandchildren know. Time of transformation. You know and I know we're in one of those times. All we have to do is look anecdotally throughout our society, and we see the rapidly changing times. Almost overwhelmingly, how fast things are changing. And that trend's not going to stop. And we also know that the condition of our infrastructure, the condition of the platform that we call community, the framework that we call community, the infrastructure, is in desperate need. And we know that we're being asked to do more and more with less and less. So what's the answer? Well, I think the answer is you. I think you're the answer. As I meet public works professionals and public servants all across North America, I hear the great ideas. I hear the insight. I hear the wisdom. I hear the operational expertise that, if brought forward, could help us be better. The innovation and creativity comes from operational experts. Benjamin Franklin said, let the people closest to the problem have a say in solving the problem because they have the most knowledge. Look at the top of the page. There's no doubt we're in challenging times. We face dangers from without and difficulties from within. Cities, departments, and agencies are being asked to do more and more with less and less. Expectations is high, and in some municipalities and some governmental agencies, funding is low. Worn-out slogans and tired old approaches won't take on the challenges of your community or any other community. Jingoistic ads and bumper sticker solutions won't solve the problems of our communities either. These challenges will only be solved by people such as you. Wait a minute, Ian, hold on, it's management's job. Well, yeah, they play a role, and trust me, I'm preaching the same message. But within you is an idea. Within you is a concept. Within you is an operational solution, because you have expertise. Some of you have been doing this longer than I've been alive. Ian, you're 47. Okay, maybe that's a stretch. Maybe not longer than I've been alive. But certainly, most of you have forgotten more about this thing that you do than I'll ever know, which means you have expertise and knowledge. You're the best people to come up with the innovative idea. But what impedes that? A lack of teamwork. What impedes that? Bitterness and anger. What impedes that? A jadedness and a crustiness. What impedes that? Some frustration, a lack of trust. That's what impedes all that. All this euphoric, conceptual, namby-pamby talk I'm laying down right now. All those attitudinal barriers impede us from moving forward. And oftentimes those attitudinal barriers are justified. I get that. But doesn't do us any good. It doesn't do that old lady trying to boil eggs, or that little girl, or that young couple just trying to live in a healthy community, thriving community. Doesn't help them. Committed professionals who understand they may not be able to handle the whole big bad world, but believe that they can handle their corner of it is the key. It's the key. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about a specific concept, a specific competency. I call it agent of change. Can you change things? Yourself and the environment around you for the better. Do you have the skills, the competencies to impact positive change? We know the world is changing around us. We know that that trend is not going to stop. We know that we can count on the fact that things will be different 5 years from now than they are today, for sure. So do we have the ability as individuals to be able to deal with that change? And can we eventually master that change? Listen to the description. Today's leader doesn't have to have a title, just today's leader understands, demonstrates, and exerts influence by building trusting relationships to act as a catalyst for change. Now look, you're not just in your department a leader. Some of you are coaching Little League. Some of you are helping run your place of faith. Some of you are on some nonprofit organization. Some of you are involved in your neighborhood association. And some of you that are in smaller communities, you're doing all that. You're not just working at your job. You're doing all the things I just described. You're leaders. You're respected professionals and you're leaders, both inside and outside of your department. So do you have the capacity? Do you understand what it takes today to get people to move, to get something done, to be an agent of change? That's what we're going to talk about the next 3 weeks. Now, some of this will apply within your workplace, but some of it will apply outside of your workplace as well. So from now on, every time we get together, I'm going to give you a little self-survey. So hopefully you have your handouts. Hopefully you're not sitting in one of those departments where it's just 20 of you looking up at a screen with nothing to write with no handouts, with nothing. That's a waste of time. You all should just get up and walk out. Whoa, whoa! Sit down. I didn't really mean that. But you got to have your handouts. So what I want you to do now is we're going to take this little self-survey. It's going to try to help you. These are indicators of where you line up in this competency. That leadership style inventory, that survey, helped you figure out your style, your approach. If you're an energizer, nurturer, researcher, organizer. But now this little survey helps you figure out where you line up in this agent of change, a person who can get things done in changing times. So I want you to do it. I'll read some of the ones randomly. You're either on one end of the scale, 1, I'm never like that, 10, I'm always like that, or somewhere in between. These little self-surveys help you focus your learning for the 3 weeks. Focus your learning. Because it identifies where you might have some deficiency or some room for improvement. Now, I'm just going to read them randomly, and you fill them out, okay? But you just fill them all out. I might not read them all. I believe I can make a difference. Oh, my God, Ian, come on, dude. I believe I can make a difference. That's so trite. That's so what is that? Now, stop and think about it. We're not going to have innovation and creativity unless somebody believes tomorrow can be better than yesterday. And we all know people who have quit and stayed. We all know professionals that have quit and stayed. You know them and I know them. Guys and gals that have quit but stayed around. That is going through the motions of the gig. Well, in changing times, they're not going to be innovators. They're not going to be creative. They're not going to come up with a solution because they've quit and stayed. And if you believe in the depth of your heart that you can actually make a difference, then the likelihood of an idea emanating from you increases significantly. The likelihood of you being a better team player significantly increases. So on the surface, I could see how that might seem trite, but it's not. If a person circles a 2, I believe I can make a difference, then that probably tells me we're not having a lot of innovation and creativity coming from that person. So where do you line up? Honestly line up. Yeah, but Ian, you don't know our situation. You don't know how to. I agree. I don't. But I do know this. If a person doesn't believe tomorrow can be better than yesterday, it won't be. I'm aware that people learn and communicate in different ways. Different ways. And there's greater and greater and greater diversity in the workplace. And I'm not just talking about the fact that my skin is brown. I'm talking about age, worldview, color, creed, religion, all kinds of diversity. And diversity is great, except one thing. A lot of times, we like to hang around people that look like us, smell like us, eat what we eat, go where we go. And sometimes all that diversity can cause just misunderstanding. So I agree, diversity is cool, but I love commonality. What do you mean by commonality? Well, it's a funny thing. You and I could be completely different with completely different worldviews, completely different color of our skin, completely different religion, completely different everything. but we both got little girls. I got a 10-year-old, I got an 8-year-old. Or maybe you had a little girl who's now grown up, and we got something in common, right? How many of you know what I'm talking about? Or we got spouse and issues there. Honey, if you're watching, I'm not you specifically as an example. I got myself in trouble on that one. So we got something in common. Common. So do you realize that the people around you might be different? And can you figure out ways to find something in common with them, even though they're different? I think of the impact of my thoughts and words and action on others. I keep an even keel despite ups and downs in life. I believe that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. I'm committed to doing something great with my life. I want to impact those around me in a positive way. I understand where I am not at my best, and I avoid those situations. I understand where I am at my best, and I try to put myself in those situations. I can adjust my style to meet the style of others. I avoid judging people. I effectively listen. You know what those are? Those are the attributes of a great teammate. Those are the attributes of a great teammate. In difficult and challenging times, we got to go back to back. In difficult and challenging times, we got to have a more cohesive team. In difficult and challenging times, we have to unite around a common goal. And as intangible as it seems, any of you that have ever been on a great team, any of you that have ever been on a great team in athletics or in the workplace or in some other activity in your life, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is no better feeling than working with a group of other people in an environment of respect and trust where you're all seeking the common goal and no one cares who gets the credit. If you've ever been in that situation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, it is that I describe that I think is necessary in changing times. It provides less stress. It provides greater productivity. We accomplish more. And in the working together, it's more sustainable. As opposed to the frustration, the anger, the bitterness, and the hell that is some environments across North America today. So the bottom line is, an agent of change understands, exerts, demonstrates influence to build trust through trusting relationships. So you can affect change from the middle or from the quote-unquote bottom if you understand the dynamics of being able to exert influence. Now, you and I both know some guys and gals that exert influence in a negative way. Negative way. And we all walk around on eggshells around them. Maybe because they're a malcontent. Maybe because you know they'll lie about you. Maybe because they've stirred up crap before and you know they'll stir up crap again. And so we all just kind of walk around on eggshells around them. They're a person of influence. But I think you can be a person of influence with your boss and your boss's boss with some simple strategies. And we're going to talk about those today. But make no mistake, we need great teams in times of change. What's the key to great team? Trust. Trust. An agent of change understands it's about trusting relationships if you want to change anything. Turn the page. Okay, so an agent of change are aware that great teams are built on trust. And the challenge of building trust are attitudinal barriers. And I mentioned some of them before. The idea of, a little bit of anger, a little bit of frustration, a little bit of feeling slighted or undervalued or a lot undervalued. All of that chips away at trust. Like I said, great teams are built on trust amongst the individuals. Yeah, but how does this help me with my job? This is nonsense. Well, hopefully, if we can work better as a team together, we can be more efficient, more effective, and it can be a less stressful workplace. How that applies directly to your situation, I don't know. But you do, you're a professional. So where does trust come from? How do we build trust amongst the team? How do I go back to back with you and you feel confident to go back to back with me? Because if I'm all alone with you and we're in a very, very difficult, challenging environment like Greg was describing, and I don't trust you, I ain't going back to back with you. It's every man for himself. So, what's my point? My point is that it's all about trust. Do I trust you? Now, that's different than liking you. We all know people that we like. We go to barbecue, have a beer, maybe even play a little golf or go out and, go do a little hunting or whatever it is we do. We like each other. But when there's work to be done, I don't want you anywhere near me. Or you don't want me anywhere near you. See, that's two different things. See, I'm talking about that trust of in the workplace, you know that guy or that gal will get it done. And they'll make it happen. And you can count on them to do it right and do it well. And you don't necessarily invite them over for the Christmas activity or the winter activity or the holiday activity. You don't necessarily invite them over for that. And you don't go have a beer with them after work. And you don't do the barbecue. But when there's work to be done, you want them around. That's what I'm talking about. So how do you build that trust? You see, by building trust with those around you, you can then exert influence with them. Because today, influence doesn't come from a title. Influence doesn't come from a position. Influence doesn't come through intimidation. No, we reject that in today's day and age. All of those. Influence comes directly and specifically from people we trust. People we trust have influence on us. So if you want to be a leader without a title and you want to expand your sphere of influence, then build trust with other people. The number one way to build trust, be vocationally competent. Now, what does that mean? Vocationally competent. That means you're good at what you do. You take your craft seriously. You do what you can to improve your craft. You do what you can to enhance your skill. You do what you can to perfect it. There was a time where we took craftsmanship very, very seriously for thousands of years. And whether that was the guild or whether that was the brotherhood or whatever that was, in specific vocations, we took the craftsmanship seriously. And I don't know what it is, but at least in my lifetime, I've seen a decline in craftsmanship. So someone who is vocationally competent is a craftsperson. They take what they do very, very seriously. And they do all that they can to be great at it. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, am I vocationally competent? Can the people around me count on me to do it and do it well? And am I consistent in that? Now, I'm not talking about being perfect. My thing is this, write this down. More days than not, more times than not, I'm great. More days than not, more times than not, I'm great. So whatever your chosen vocation is, are you consistently, more days than not, and are you consistently, more times than not, hitting the mark or exceeding the mark? If you are, people will start to trust you. I know some frontline employees in some departments, the director listens to what they have to say. They've built such a reputation for being vocationally competent that not only do the supervisors and managers listen, the director listens. Because when that gal or that guy talks about the thing they do, everybody in the department knows they know exactly what they're talking about. And nobody even tries to challenge them because they know what they're talking about. Everybody knows they know what they're talking about. That's what I'm speaking to, that influence. You probably have known people like that in your professional career, that even the highest titles listen to them when they're talking about their job because everybody knows they know their job. That's called influence. And where does it begin? Being vocationally competent. You know where else trust comes from? Trust comes from communication. Your ability to communicate with others. Now, in the past, when we only worked with people that were just like us, and remember, that has nothing to do with color of skin. Just like us can be age, just like us can be worldview, just like us could be background. Well, there was a time where, for the most part, Jeff, we worked with people just like us. Whatever just like us was. But now we're not working with people just like us. It's a good bet we're probably working with people that are not like us at some point. So more than ever, if I want to have a successful team, we've got to understand communication. Do you know that 85% of what happens in the workplace is communication? 85%. That's why so many of the issues come from a lack of communication or miscommunication. So I think it's imperative that if I want to be a person of influence, I got to understand communication. Well, I feel like communication breaks, styles of communication or filters of communication break down into 4 categories. People only communicate through 4 filters. 1, there's some people that are fact-based communicators. They communicate in fact, right? So it's numbers, it's linear, it's step-by-step, it's sequential. Just give me the facts, man. Don't give me the BS. Just cut to the chase and tell me exactly what I need to know. Fact-based communicator. Then you have some people that are emotion-based communicators. Whatever they're feeling at any given moment, at any given time, whatever they're feeling at that second is what you're getting. How many of you know somebody like that? And as long as you know how they're feeling, you're going to know what you're going to get. But God forbid that you don't know what they're feeling and you bring something up and hoo-hoo. So that emotion-based communicator. Then there's the value-based communicator. Everybody, you, me, everybody has a unique set of values that they operate by. Values are just that which I operate by. Now, even the mafia has a unique set of values. And if you understand what they are, you got a better opportunity to communicate. Everybody has that. So some people communicate through the unique set of ways they do life. You know, it's funny, I've heard guys that have been in the profession for a long time sometimes say, these young people, they don't understand. You know what it is? Different set of values. What the 22-year professional might have a different set of values than the 55-year professional, 55-year-old professional. My daughter's 22, my oldest, and she works in the oil fields. She's a chemical engineer, but she works in oil fields. Tough work. She gets paid phenomenal money. Woo! Aren't we excited about that? But tough work, and I just visited her. I was in Fort McMurray, Alberta, the head end of the Keystone Pipeline, right? So my daughter's up there working in the oil fields as a chemical engineer, and she has a truck that she's in charge of, and she's got 4 guys older than me that she's responsible for. You know, it's kind of like in the Army. She's a lieutenant, if you will. And then she's got these sergeants working for her. And I met the sergeants when I was there. And I was like, wow, these guys are old. One guy's like 56. Now, I'm not saying that's old, but in comparison to my daughter, I'm 47, and every guy that my daughter was supervising was older than me. And I took a step back from that, and I just thought, different worldviews, man. Different worldviews. And so later that evening, we talked about it over supper, over dinner. And we talked about the dynamics of leading in that environment. And she's an exceptional performer. But she said, you know, I'm having trouble relating. Flip that. Maybe you're the 55 and you're supervising a bunch of 20-somethings. Or maybe you work peer-to-peer and you're the 20-something working with a bunch of 55s. Or anything in between. The ability to communicate those values, the ability to understand how they're operating is going to give you a greater opportunity to make a connection, adjusting your communication style to meet theirs. And that's what I suggested to my daughter. You're going to have to adjust your communication style to meet their communication style. And she said to me, Dad, their communication style is not to communicate. And I said, I understand. They're just older gentlemen. They don't do a lot of talking. They do a whole bunch of working. The number one way to influence them, young lady, is to do a whole bunch of working and a little bit less talking. And she understood. Well, I don't know your situation, and I only use that autobiographical story of my daughter just to say this. It's an example of understanding communication styles and adjusting. So you have values-based communicators. And then finally, you have belief-based communicators. Belief-based communicators. That's the guy or gal who says this, well, you know, I believe. I believe. Tell you what I believe. And you could show them every fact in the world. And you could lay it all out. Here's the facts. And at the end of your little soliloquy or dissertation, they'll look at you and go like this. Yep, yep. Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you what I believe. It won't matter because they believe something. And again, doesn't necessarily mean faith or religion. It just means they believe something to be the truth, and that's the truth. Those are the 4 basic communication filters. If you want to be a person of influence, what you'll do is start adjusting your communication filter to meet others. To meet others. If they're a fact-based communicator, you'll communicate with them in facts. If you're a values-based communicator, you'll try to understand the values they operate on, and you'll try to communicate through that, and so on and so on. Now, here's the funny thing. If you did take that leadership style inventory, if you did that exercise on Monday, or any time between Monday and now, if you combine that, researcher, nurturer, organizer, energizer, with these communication styles, and you kind of look at the people around you, and people look at you, and if you got any half a brain in your head, you'll be able to better understand. And better understanding comes to deeper trust. And deeper trust means a more cohesive team. And a more cohesive team means we do our job better and we impact our community in a more profound way. And it all comes back down to this. Can I communicate with you? And can we find some common ground? Can we look at each other's style and find some common ground? And can we, our work style, our approach, and can we find some common ground in the way we communicate? I'm not doing it. Okay. And that's why I won't move forward in difficult and challenging times. Now, sometimes things become so difficult and so challenging, people are forced to work together. That's how this whole thing got built 100 years ago. Because the wolves would come out and the snow would pile up, and I had a barn to build, and so did you, and so we worked together because we would die if we didn't work together. Oh, I didn't like your style, and I didn't like the way you communicated, but I knew I would die. So I helped you, and you helped me because our survival was at stake. Do you think it's any less intense just because we got a smartphone? Do you really believe it's any less as significant? Well, I don't know if people are dying. Really? Whether they're literally or figuratively dying, you and I both know we are in challenging times, and we need a spirit of cooperation and teamwork to get things done. And the animosity and the anger that I see in some departments, maybe not yours, it's all those other 4,000 departments that aren't participating in the program. The 50 departments we have participating, everything's great. It's the other yahoos. But the animosity that I see, I understand where it comes from. I'm not even saying that the animosity is not justified, but I don't think it serves us well in the long term. So we got to figure it out. Someone's got to step to the middle. Well, it usually begins as I better understand you and you better understand me, and we realize we have some things in common. So let's hope that it doesn't get to a place where we're forced to work together because the adversity is so intense we have no choice. Let's be smart enough to make the choice to work together. What's the first step in working together? Understanding each other. Then we build some trust, and now we work together in a deeper and more profound way than we did before. So I got an exercise for you. And I want you to start to do it at home first, okay? For the next 7 days, I want you to listen like somebody's going to die at midnight. What? How many of you agree with me that listening is a lost art? We don't listen. And whether that's because of all the media that hits us every day, or whether because no one has anything to say so we just tune people out, or whether it's because we get tired of hearing the same nonsense, we don't listen. So I think that one of the keys to building trust is listening. No more influential or no more better way to build influence with people than to listen to them and help them feel valued because you listen to them. Not necessarily always agreeing with them, but at least listening. So the concept is that if I listened to you like you were going to leave the planet at midnight, if I knew you were dying at midnight, I would listen. I would shut off my cell phone. I would shut off my thoughts that are going off in 75 different directions. And I would focus on you with my full heart and my full soul and all that I had. I would listen to what you were saying to me because I knew you were dying. Well, I want you to start doing that for the next 7 days. Listen to me now. You listen to me. I want you to listen to people. And I want you to start at your house. I want you to start with your kid. I know I'm a victim of it. I am a victim of it, man. My daughter comes in to tell me a story in my little man cave, in my little office, and she starts talking. And it used to be that I could fool them. I could fool my kids. I could keep working on whatever I was working on, and I could insert an appropriate or that's cool, oh, really, at the appropriate, one of those things at the appropriate time, and they would believe I was listening. And I was really good, Jeff, at that. But you know what's happened? They're 10 and 8 now, and they are not going to be fooled. And the other day, little Nadia was telling me a story in my office. And I was like, oh, yeah, yep, nice. And then when I looked up from my computer, she had left. So that means about halfway through the story, she realized I was full of crap and wasn't paying attention to anything she was saying, and she left. Broke my heart. And then it hit me. That's why parents lose their kids. That's why parents have kids running amok sometimes, because they're not listening. And so the kids go to find someone else that will listen, someone else that will pay attention. Well, what does this have to do with being a leader? Hey, man, if you can't lead in your house, how are you going to be a leader anywhere else? So let's practice where it will be most challenging, with your spouse and with your kids. That's where it's the most challenging. And then let that cascade out to the workplace, to really listen to what people are saying, or listen to what's not being said. Listen to people like they're going to die at midnight. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not easy. It's hard. It's a hard exercise because we are so used to being distracted. So you set down your phone, you set down your whatever, you focus on the person in front of you, and you really try to understand what they're saying to you. They say, and I don't know who does this research, but I read it a while back, that like 78% of workplace mistakes come from poor communication. And do you think that we can afford, both financially or in time or in energy, financially, time, or energy, do you think that we can afford to have 78% of our mistakes come from just poor communication? What if we just got better at communicating? Could we reduce 78% down to 40? Could we eliminate 38% of the mistakes that go on if we all just got better at communicating? Well, where does that begin? With you shutting your mouth and listening to what somebody has to say. Well, that's pretty harsh, Ian. Well, somebody's got to shut their mouth and listen. Might as well start with me. And this would be a very boring show if I just sat here and listened. Because I can't hear you. Will you take it? Will you take the challenge? And will you start in your home? And if you got kids under 18 or maybe over 18, will you listen to them? Or how about your spouse? This weekend, will you really listen? And they're going to look at you like, what's wrong with you? Why are you staring at me? I'm trying to listen. I think you're going to die at midnight. What? You're hoping I die at midnight? No, I didn't. No, that's not what I said. The chubby brown man, that's me. The chubby brown man told me to really listen, so I'm listening to you. And they're going to say, how about don't listen to that chubby brown man anymore? Trust comes from personal dependability. Personal dependability. What can I count on from you? Huh? Yeah, write that down. What can your people around you count on from you? Can they count on a smart aleck remark? Can they count on that thing to always be done wrong? Can they count on you to roll your eyes when the supervisor gives a new idea? Can they count on you to say something offensive and off color that's not appropriate in the workplace? Can they count on you to be 10 minutes late? What can they count on you? Because if I sat down over a beer with each one of them, they could probably tell me exactly what I could count on from you. Personal dependability. Now, there's others of you that they can count on you to always be there a little bit early. They can count on you to go the extra mile and help them out. They can count on you for a kind word. They can count on you for a supportive gesture. They can count on you for an understanding when a mistake is made. What can somebody count on you for? How are you personally dependable with others? Part of building trust is that dependability. They may not like you, but if you want to expand your sphere of influence, people are able to depend on you for something. Because as I can depend on someone, my respect for them goes up. And as my respect for them goes up, their ability to influence me increases. You don't have to have a title today to get things done, in my opinion. You just need to be able to exert influence. Now, there's some guys and gals out there exerting influence in a negative way, and you know who they are. But you can exert influence in a positive way if you're dependable. I think in today's day and age, if you want to build trust with coworkers and others, you got to have a high emotional IQ. What does that mean? That means when you get frustrated, when you get angry, you don't go off the handle, you don't blow up, because people won't tolerate that anymore. They're not as forgiving anymore. Instead, when your elevator starts to rise, you have the ability to disengage the clutch and let it idle for a minute. To gather your thoughts, to gather your emotions. Because you know that that's going to have a ripple effect around everybody. And people don't easily forget that anymore. And finally, if you want to build trust with others, I think you got to be relatable. I think you got to be likable. Jennifer Aniston. You remember her, the actress, Friends, and now she does movies. I mean, let's be honest, she's not the greatest actress of all time. No offense to all you Jennifer Aniston fans. Right? No offense to you. No offense to Jennifer Aniston, because you may be watching right now. I know she's a big fan of the show. Yeah, exactly. Is she the greatest actress in all time? Probably not. No offense, Jennifer. But I'll tell you one thing. She always got a good box office. Why? Because she's relatable and she's likable. Now, does that mean that you're a kiss ass? Excuse my language. No. You're just relatable to people. And you're likable. You're generally a nice person. We all know people that have become so jaded and so crusty in this thing that they're just not likable. Nobody wants to be on their team because they're not likable. And then finally, I think you got to love what you do. I think, and going back to that stayed and quit, I think there's a lot of people that have quit and stayed. And they just don't like what they do, which isn't good for their mental health or their well-being, and it's not good for the mental health and the well-being of those around them. If you don't like what you do anymore, then something's got to change. You got to find something within the workplace that you still enjoy, or you've got to find a compelling reason for continuing to go to work and be enjoyable, or you got to get out. But you can't just be a curmudgeon that's angry and pissed off that you're going to that workplace every day. Because that's not good for you. That's not good for your heart and your stress and your blood pressure. And it's certainly not good for your family, and certainly not good for the people that work around you. So something's got to change. And unfortunately, it probably ain't going to be your boss or your boss's boss. So really the only one that can change is you. All right, how do I exert influence? I got to build trust. How do we have a great team? Trust. Where does that come from? Be vocationally competent. Be great at what you do. Understand that there's different communication styles. Check out what yours is. Check out what those around you are, and see if you can find some commonality in communication. Listen to people like they're going to die at midnight. Give them your full attention, because you build trust by listening. Be personally dependable. What can people count on from you, for sure? What do you deliver no matter what? Actually be proactive and write that down. And then you got to be relatable, and you got to be likable. You can't be a crusty curmudgeon that nobody wants to be around. That's not okay. And I know for a fact that there's some of you, that's the badge you wear. Well, I'm just kind of crusty. I'm kind of a curmudgeon. But everybody's okay with it. No, we're not. We're not okay with it. Life's hard enough that we have to deal with you on top of it. I say that in love. Okay, so one piece of this agent of change is understanding how to build trust with others so that you can exert influence. In the balance of our time, I want to talk about the other piece. How do you react to change? Look, progress and change are indelibly intertwined. There can be no progress without change. If you're one of those people that is just bemoaning the fact that things are changing, I'm angry that things are changing. I'm sorry, but you're a fool. Because you haven't looked at the universe. You haven't looked at the world. You haven't looked at science. Nothing stays the same. Nothing. And many of us have bought into the lie where we kill ourselves, fight and fight and fight to get to a day where we'll retire and then everything will stay the same. There's nowhere in science that supports that. There's nowhere in the universe that supports that. There's nowhere on God's green earth that supports that as a reality. Nothing stays the same. So instead of trying to dig our heels in the ground and fight against a law of science, nothing stays the same. Instead of doing that, what if we mastered this thing called change? What if we actually understood the dynamics of it, how we reacted to it, and then made the most of it? Simply saying, how can we go with the flow of this thing called change and make the most out of it? Mastering change, because progress and change are indelibly intertwined. There can be no progress without change. So here's something to contemplate. I think there's 5 reactions to change. And where do you line up in it? Reactions to change fall into a number of groups. This is not an attempt to pinhole people, since most of us will fall into each of these groupings for different kinds of changes in different times in our lives. But just how are you reacting to the changes in your life right now? Early risers. These are people that like change, almost for change's sake. They're like my wife. My wife colors her hair a different color like every 90 days. And every 90 days or so, the kids freak out because their mom looks different. That's my wife. She likes change. She likes to change things up. She likes to... Me, not so much. I kind of like things the same. But there are some of you out there that I would term early risers. You like change almost for change's sake. Then there's early adopters. They're comfortable with change as long as they know a little bit about it. They want some logic. Some of you are okay with change, but not just for change's sake. You want to know that there's a plan, or at least that there's an outcome and a point or a purpose to changing. Early adapters. Then there's the crowd. Next to that, you could write sheeple. Sheeple. Well, what? Yeah, sheep, people, the crowd. They just kind of go with the flow of change. They don't care. Whatever. I'm just trading time for money. Now, before you judge them, think about it. There have been times in your life, as there have been in my life, well, I don't care. It's fine. Whatever we do, fine. I'm okay with it. So it's not to be disparaging, but there is the crowd that will go to and fro depending on the polarity, the strength of the polarity. If positive is ruling the day, they'll flow positive. If negative is ruling the day, they'll flow negative. The legitimizer. They're found within the crowd, but they have significant influence with the crowd. Why? Because they say or do what the crowd wants to say or do but won't. They're the people at the end of the meeting. The end of the meeting. When the person in charge of the meeting has said, okay, are there any other questions? And we're all saying this, please, God, no questions, no questions, no questions. God, let me just get out of here, no questions, please. And then they do this, I have a question. And we all go, ugh. That's the legitimizer. They can come off being a resistor. They can come off being negative, but they're not negative. If you pull back the onion just a little bit, what you find is they care deeply. And they really do want answers to the questions that they're asking because they do care so deeply. They're not a part of the crowd, but they also are not up for change unless you can give them real answers and there's some depth and breadth to the logic of what you want to do. They're legitimizers. They get their legitimacy from the crowd because they say or do what the crowd won't say or do. They have influence because they're willing to say or do. But supervisors and managers often knock them off as malcontents or negative because they do ask questions. And then finally, the resistor. This is the individual that's just resistant. They just dig their heels in the ground, and for whatever reason, they don't want to change. Maybe because they got slighted before. Maybe they've seen changes come down the pipe and be useless anyhow, or maybe because they're going through a divorce, or maybe their kid's in rehab, and the only stable place in life is the workplace, and now that's even turning upside down. So I'm not exactly sure what causes a person to be resistant, but they are resistant. For the most part, those are the 5 reactions to change. They're big categories, but people fall usually into one of those 5 categories. So the question is, where are you? Where are you in the changes that are going on in your life? And whether that's changes in society, whether that's changes in your neighborhood, whether that's changes in your house, whether that's changes in your workplace. How are you doing with it? And what category do you fall into? And is the category you're in serving you well? What? See, it's not a value judgment. I'm not making a value judgment here. Maybe there are times where it is good to be a resistor. I don't know. I just know this. You must, as a professional, ask yourself, is this serving me well? Because sometimes it's not good to be an early riser. Just half-cocked, take off running into change. Maybe that's not the wisest thing. Well, you got to embrace change. Not sometimes. Sometimes that change is not very good and not well thought through and actually going to cause more harm than good. And I know that because I have operational knowledge. But I keep my mouth shut because, okay, I'll go with the flow. Well, maybe that's not the best thing. But on the other hand, maybe the best thing isn't to be resistant. So I don't know because I'm not you. But I know this. It's one of these 5. And you got to ask yourself, is the approach that I'm taking to the change that I'm dealing with, is it serving me well? Early riser, early adapter, the crowd, I don't care. Legitimizer, resistor. Look, you know and I know that we're in a time of change. You know and I know that some of those changes hurt and are difficult. You know and I know that this transformational time that we're in probably isn't ending anytime soon. If we want to be successful professionals in this noble and honorable work that you do, then we're going to have to be able to be agents of change. Agents of change, which means we understand, we demonstrate, and we exert influence to get things done. Influence through trust. Great teams are built on trust, period. So whether it's the 3 employees that you work with or the 30 employees you work with, what kind of trust we got going on? And how am I reacting and how are we reacting to the change that we're facing? Over the next 3 weeks, we'll unpack this information. Side note, if you're a department that only comes to this 1 hour, then this is probably a waste of time for you. We got to figure out a way for you to see those weekly emails or be able to access the information that everyone else is getting throughout the program. And if you're in one of those departments, send me an email so we can figure it out. Because there's other learning that goes on in between, via email, via video, on the learning portal. And I understand that many of you, especially frontline professionals, don't have an email address or you can't get to a computer, but we just got to figure it out. So this is a more robust program for you. You're worth it. Your work is important and it's valuable. You touch every citizen from cradle to grave. Your platform, your framework, your infrastructure is what makes a 21st century community a 21st century community. And in these changing times, we need all of us to be our best so that we can take on the challenges of the day and touch every citizen from cradle to grave in a positive way. I thank you for your hard work. Hopefully you'll process this information as we unpack it over the next 3 weeks, okay? I'll see you on Monday morning through that video and that email, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a great weekend.